And we are live. It is another great day to talk about cybersecurity on Cribble TV. We have noted security expert Matt Johansson is here with us today, coming out of Austin. So, Matt, how are you doing today?
Good. I saw you call me a security export on the tweet today. It was a funny typo. I said, yeah, everyone's just trying to get rid of me,
Hey, if I could spell, I would have a better job. But
It's not what
actually,
not what they pay us for. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I know if it wasn't for spell check, I would be homeless. But yeah, but absolutely, I really appreciate you being here. So, how's the weather in Austin?
We had a fake fall last week, and it's starting to warm up again, but it's actually pretty beautiful out. So
Nice.
it was nice for all the people that came in for ACL. It was like, I don't know, 250,000 extra people here for the past 2 weeks.
That's crazy.
So that's not going to help our housing prices, the weather being so nice while they were here after
Did
we
you
just
see any
got
great
beat up
shows?
all summer.
Nice. Did you see any great shows at ACL?
No, I didn't go, but just close enough that you can kind of hear it from time to time. But I heard Mumford and Sons put on a great show both weekends. So
That's pretty awesome. I
yeah,
love ACL. Can't
yeah,
beat that. I've seen a
yeah.
couple of shows, and it was always that was a privilege.
Yeah, it's just a traffic causer for me, but
Oh yeah. I mean, when you live there, oh my gosh, there's so many
yeah,
people.
yeah. Between that and South by, it's like and this big infusion. And October is crazy because next weekend is, or this coming weekend is F1 too. So there's just like a million extra people here the month of October. So
Yeah, very. I mean, the Learjets are going to be flying in.
yep,
The high end, the ballers are
yep,
going to Austin, and then they're going to Vegas. So what a
yep,
day!
yeah.
All right. So one thing I wanted to talk to you about was, I always, this is my biggest thing I talk to my guests about. Tell me what you think about the state of cybersecurity. What's going right, what's going wrong. What do you think?
The state of the union, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, I think we've come a long way in cybersecurity in a lot of different areas, and we've gotten like significantly more advanced in our capabilities to detect all sorts of different threats. And then at the same time, if you look at something like the DBIR, which I of course read every year, is just if you're not familiar, Verizon's data breach incident report, right, where they put out the statistics of all of the recorded data breaches of the year. And if you look at something like that, we're still trending upward, right? We're still seeing more and more successful data breaches every year, and they're still using the same techniques that we've known about since the dawn of time, right?
Yeah.
So while our capabilities are getting more advanced, we're still kind of failing at some of the basics. Things like phishing are still just like rampant. And then just companies actually adding the investment and the capability enhancement on their team to either prevent these things or detect them and respond quickly, right? You're seeing, and the talent gap is huge, right? You're seeing certain companies get attacked by these same threat actors that maybe attacked like Las Vegas a few weeks ago. Those same threat actors have attacked a number of other companies that have not experienced that same impact that MGM experienced, right? That same attack and the same threat actor with that same capability, you're seeing some other companies shut that down within minutes, right? So obviously, we know what to do. It's just the broadening of the okay, can we flatten the capability curve? I think who used to say, Wendy Nather, I think used to say the infosec poverty line, right? And a lot of people are still below the infosec poverty line, and that was always a controversial topic. But I think it's important to talk about if we're talking about the state of cybersecurity, right?
It's an interesting contrast because the idea is that your capabilities have gotten better, but the results aren't, and so it's kind of a kind of two diagonals. One's going up and one's going down. Why do you think that's happening?
I think there's probably a few reasons there. I think capabilities of the attackers are as on the same trajectory, right? Like
Right.
we're all learning together. I think a lot of the tooling that attackers use is also like being streamlined, and there's a lot of really smart people working on tools that attackers use. I think there was a good stat. I'm not going to get the numbers right, so I'm not even going to try. But
Oh yeah.
there was a good stat about like CVSS score. Like a lot of us use CVSS score to like choose how we prioritize which vulnerabilities we fix. And I remember Ed Bellis and Mike Reitman out of Kenna used to talk a lot about how that was, no better than throwing a dart at your pile of vulnerabilities if you were actually going to try to fix something that would have caused a breach.
Right.
And that they postulated, and I can't remember the number, but that actually, if a vulnerability had an exploit in Metasploit, that was a better predictor of would it be used in a future data breach, right? So even like a red teaming tool like Metasploit, is something that threat actors are obviously making use of, because it really lowers the intelligence bar needed to kick off an exploit. You don't need to write your own buffer overflow or reverse shell or whatever it is, right? It's all kind of part of a suite that helps you attack everyone. So as these tools get better and the attackers get better, even though we're getting better, it's, we're still seeing the same amount of data breaches, if not more, right?
Do you think also that as more and more companies get online, increased digitization, it's creating a greater risk of threats?
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time like pointing to that, because it feels like that ship sailed a while ago. It feels like that probably wouldn't be moving the needle anymore. It's been a long time since I've gone to a small business and had to do anything not digital, right? I
Right.
remember growing up, some small businesses, you'd still have to kind of deal with their filing cabinet
Yeah, true.
system, right? Whether it was a doctor or your mechanic or something like that, right? And even those small, mom and pop shops, it's been a long time since I've seen anything like that. And that's not even really what we're seeing in terms of the data breaches. The attackers are also going after a high return on investment, right? So someone who's slow to digitize, how valuable is that information really anyway, right? Or how
Right.
much information is there, right, in it? So a lot of these threat actors are going after the soft targets with a whole lot of data sitting behind them. So you're seeing ransomware get deployed at hospitals and schools and things like that, which obviously we look at as, almost repugnant, right? Hey, you just took a hospital offline. That could actually cause human loss of life, right? By
Right.
taking some life-saving machines offline because someone got locked out due to ransomware. But because of that, they know that there might be a higher likelihood that they get paid out their ransom, right?
That's
So
true.
these attackers are just coin operated, right? So I don't necessarily think it's like increased digitization as it is follow the money, right?
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
there's a market for the data that's stolen. There's a market for paid out ransom. I mentioned the Vegas hacks a few weeks ago. You saw talk about a perfect case study. You saw two casinos hacked in the same week by the same threat actors with the same techniques. They both got issued a ransom. One paid, one didn't,
Right.
right? And it was like, okay, well, what happened from both of those, right? So obviously there's money to be made, right? Like Caesars paid them $15 million. You think they're going to stop now?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean it's a huge issue.
Yeah,
I think maybe not digitization, but maybe move to the cloud, or just
sure.
how can you have one account breach then take down an entire enterprise? That just seems like, because just from a detection standpoint, it's so hard to detect one thing happening. But how does that one account then take down everything?
Yes, maybe not increased digitization, but increased interconnectivity, right? Is
There
probably
you go. Okay.
part of the issue, right? Is like how many SaaS apps does a general enterprise have at this point, right? Where it used to be you had your internal apps, you had your customer facing apps, and that was pretty much it.
Right.
Well, now you have hundreds, if not thousands, of SaaS apps that your employees are using to do their day-to-day jobs. And part of that is giving all these SaaS companies a whole bunch of the information that would normally have only been in-house and
That's true. I mean, when you think
and
about
everything,
it,
right?
your authentication has now become a SaaS service.
Yeah. And so when you say, oh, one account was compromised and all this data was stolen, it's like, well, yeah, that one account was not just gating that one box anymore, or that one database anymore, or that
Right.
one internal app anymore. That one account is gating all those internal apps, all those internal boxes, and this sea of SaaS apps that all of the data that I care about anyway is in all those SaaS apps also, right? So yeah, I think that probably has an increased impact.
So would you call that almost a hygiene issue or an architectural issue? Or is that just something that's just part of doing business in the modern world?
I think it has to do with just the explosion and the proliferation of these things. The amount of SaaS apps beyond like an
Mhm.
Okta account just didn't exist, right? I didn't work for a place that had one of those Okta port. If anyone listening, if you're a customer, you log into Okta and you have all these tiles of dozens of SaaS apps, right? And then you you have a mixed, if you're the admin, if you're the security person behind that, right? So you're pointing to that one account gateway to everything. If you're the person defending your accounts and praying for that not one account compromise or someone falling for that phishing attack, you have to do all the right things to make sure that you can respond quickly. It's not out of the box, just like, oh
Right.
yeah, you're good, security admin. Even if that account gets popped, oh, just click this button and it shuts off access to all those SaaS apps. No, you have to, like, some of them are skim enabled, some of them aren't. Some of them you kill the Okta account and it kills the session. Some of them don't. Some of them you have to go into each of those SaaS apps and like individually kill them. So we're just playing catch up at this point. So
Right.
not necessarily an architecture or a hygiene issue. It's more of just the security features of this crazy proliferation of identity across the internet. We're just trying to play catch up with the security
Mhm.
features of that. And there's like a big push right now, even in the government, right, of making security not an add-on. Like we have these companies that are saying, hey, yeah, you can get the security version of, or the secure version of this, but that's going to cost a premium.
I hate that.
And it's, well, what do you mean? That just should
Right.
just be how it works. You're an identity provider. Why does the secure version cost more? Like, why are you
Yeah.
selling an insecure version, right? So there's like bills that being proposed and different government regulations being proposed to kind of knock that off to a degree. I'm sure, you know, there'll still be
Yeah.
upsells and things like that.
I'm not surprised. I mean, you look at Microsoft when they revealed that they had somehow lost an authentication key for O365, that we didn't retain the data long enough to know when it happened and if there was lateral movement. I'm
Yeah,
thinking to myself, wow.
they didn't pay for their own premium log storage.
Yeah. Just like
That
oh,
hack is something else, man.
yeah.
The how the attackers got that key is something that, you know, I don't think you can ding Microsoft on. But yes, you're saying, it's
No.
kind of funny that we don't have the logs. It's,
Yeah, I mean,
oh, you don't
I
pay
can get,
for
yeah. I
E5
mean,
or whatever it is.
exactly. I mean, I can get the idea of the breach, because that was a very targeted, and of course, when you're a nation state, you have the capabilities of doing such a targeted attack. But the idea that you can't retain the data long enough to understand the when, the how, and the what. I mean, that's the thing that bothers me.
Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying before about
You
you
know,
know, if Microsoft is having that problem,
right?
could
It's
you
everybody.
I honestly think Microsoft has one of the best security teams on the planet, and this is what they're dealing with, right? And I think that they are
Yeah.
honestly have some of the cream of the crop, right? And yet, you know, this is what's going on with them. So could you imagine what's going on? Like,
Oh yeah.
are other high value but maybe smaller or less security investment targets equally as popped, and they just don't know because they don't they don't have the logs, right?
Yeah,
They don't even have the
exactly.
protections, right?
It's a huge issue. I mean, it's almost an anachronism of more about security being a data problem, and it's just, and that's a great example of how do you store that data? How do you understand? Bad data drives bad detections. I mean, all those things. I mean, if you're a small and medium business, I'm ready to give up.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's when are you going to make that investment versus, you know, stop waking up and rolling the dice every day
Yeah.
versus like, hey, I'm a business person and I need, you know, to pour money in the bucket that makes us money, right? I need more customers, so I put money in this bucket. And that's, yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
totally.
you see a big push culturally, especially at, like, in Silicon Valley type companies, of making security be a value add instead of just a cost center, right? Showing that to your customers or your advertisers or media buyers or whatever it is. Hey, like, look at how much money we invest in security. That is why you should trust us with like XYZ account, right? To kind of point to security as a value creation, right? It's more culturally
Absolutely.
than anything, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. Now, so one of the things, so we're about halfway through, so I want to talk to you. But one of the things I really like about your writing, you constantly talk about the idea of secure by default. Can you tell me what that means, and where you like to apply that?
Yeah, I think we've undergone a bit of a cultural shift in some security organizations where security isn't just the job of the security team. So traditionally, you have a security team, they are running scanners, they're running tools, they're finding problems, they're sending PDFs over the fence and saying, here's a bunch of stuff you got to go fix. Or you hire a security consulting shop that comes in and, you know, bangs on a bunch of things and then hands over, hey, here's the pile of problems we found. It's pretty detached from the actual team that is building the products, or moving the money around the business, or whatever it is, managing the data. This whole traditional, like, oh, security's over here and they just tell us when we have issues and then we go fix it because they told us to, versus, hey, how do you make security just part of everyone's day-to-day job? It is everyone's job, whether you know it or not. This goes back to the whole shift left movement in general, of like, hey, we want security scanning or identifying vulnerabilities to happen earlier in the SDLC.
Yeah.
And that's just one piece of it. But having the path that you give your developers, or whatever it is, your builders, giving them the path that the easiest, cheapest, fastest way to do it is also the most secure way to do it is actually the goal for a lot of organizations today. Is how do you create this developer experience? We have developer experience professionals now, whole departments dedicated to developer experience. How do you make security part of the developer experience so that you don't need it to be an add-on of like, oh yeah, later we'll find security vulnerabilities later and then fix them? Well, no. How do you make sure you build guardrails, you build a paved road to production, you do all of these kinds of things? I know Netflix has popularized a lot of this terminology, but you're seeing broader and broader adoption of, okay, how can we kind of bake this into everything that we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, because if you start out with your foundation, you're more likely you'll have less issues.
It's also, I mean, yeah, you talk about time to fix going down, you talk about all this kind of stuff, but just the cultural implications of like, hey, we're sharing this responsibility with the rest of the org, right?
Right.
It's not just, oh yeah, we have this world-class security team, they find all these problems super fast and they help us fix, and they help drive time to fix down and all this kind of stuff. No. Instead of that, like having some ownership for the rest of the org to go, no, hey, security is part of all of our jobs, right? Every time I open an email and decide whether or not I'm clicking a link, I'm making a security decision for my organization. Right?
Oh, definitely. Do you think that requires a mind? Because I think traditionally there's been kind of a relationship of conflict between security and the rest of the org. Do you think it requires a mind shift change, a culture change in security to be successful?
100%. You can't be the department and know and expect that the other teams are going to come to bat and be like, yeah, let's like build all these tools into our pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to, again, like, they're paying your bills. So how do we enable the product to move at the speed at which that they want to move, while also giving them like a clear path? And that's when the secure by defaults come in. Instead of educating them about security, it's not their job to know about security. Even though I'm saying security is their job, it's not their job to be an expert in it or know anything about it. But if you give them the tools that the easiest, cheapest, fastest way to do their job is also the most secure way to do their job, okay, now we're talking, right? And then that takes not only technology investment but cultural investment as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, especially incentives, I mean, people respond to incentives. I think that's a fundamental nature of humanity. And so I think that giving those incentives is really important. Here's one example I wanted to ask you about. I've seen personally where you have a CI/CD pipeline that requires sign-offs from two different security teams for any push to production. I think that's maybe a good example of kind of getting in the way where you don't necessarily need to.
Yeah, I gave a talk. I think it was like 2013, so probably about 10 years ago, at Black Hat, about securing CI/CD pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting in the room was Zane Lackey, who was head of security over at Etsy at the time. And Etsy was famous for pushing code every day. Like your first day as a developer at Etsy, or any employee on the tech side of the house, you push code to production your first day.
Nice.
So, and they were famous for how many times a day everyone was pushing code to production, and they had this like robust rollback plan. And if it broke, this was the path, and whatever, resiliency, all this kind of stuff. And we were giving this I was giving this talk, and someone raised their hand and said, hey, well, what about change control? Security needs to be there needs to be a change control process of like, hey, what's going to change? And security needs to sign off before that change goes live. And I'll never forget, someone else in the room, it wasn't even Zane, it was someone sitting near Zane, who was obviously on the Zane side of the house, turned to him and said, Yes, because before CI/CD pipelines and DevOps, we were free of security vulnerabilities.
Right.
Basically saying like, hey, you slowed everything down and still pushed insecure code,
Right.
right? So how do we enable the business to do what they need to do and build security into it? And like, you're actually enabling getting the fix out faster as well. I've seen people with 6-month release cycles. They find a vulnerability. It's hell on earth to try to get that thing patched out
Right.
of that 6-month release cycle. Well, if you're pushing code every day, you find a vulnerability, it's fixed within minutes.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I've worked in orgs where it was a once a year
Yeah.
push cycle.
Yeah.
Talk about hell. I mean,
Yeah.
just unmitigated. Yeah, and I think that's just where you have to set things up, and I think, and just like you're saying, you have to have more frequent pushes to prod, like that cycle I was mentioning to you. That wasn't a push to prod; that was a push to dev.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
idea that you have to get someone to sign off and review your code to push to dev, I was like, well, you're just getting in the way.
Yeah. Well, how fast can your developers move, right? Hey, I'm working on this feature. I think it works, and I'll put it in the queue, and maybe someone will sign off on it in a few days. Versus like, hey, we're gonna do this right now, and we're gonna see if it works.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like a 2 day turnaround to push to dev. Of course, developer
Yeah.
velocity was slow. It was
Yeah.
like airship slow.
It depends, obviously depends on your threat model, right?
Mhm.
If we're talking, I've done work previously with large financial institutions. If you're talking about pushing to your ATMs, which are not on a network,
Oh
right?
yeah,
So like
totally.
pushing to them is a different situation because they are not on the same network. Hey, okay, I understand that there's a different threat model when it comes to physical machines in the world that dispense money
Oh yeah. I used to live next
versus
door to this guy who wrote code for nuclear reactors. He
right.
shared with me what he was doing, and like I was like, okay, I got it.
Different threat model than
Yeah,
website that sells like yarn products like Etsy. Got it, right? But philosophically, what we're talking
right,
about is just enabling. Most of us don't work for nuclear reactors. Most of us
right,
work for companies that are trying to make some sort of product that makes money, either SaaS or a service or whatever it is, right?
right.
But yes, this change to accelerate speed to fix, like you're enabling speed to build also helps enable security's team to fix and implement and move fast as well.
Yeah.
We just tend to be a little bit slow as as the industry.
Right.
And
I
we
think
play
that
a lot of catch up to this.
exactly. I think that main takeaway is your culture, your systems, your incentives can make security better for everyone, but also not make it just not be the party of no.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
If you're an enabling department, if you talked about incentives, if those incentives are more carrot and less stick,
yes.
or if you only need to incentive some of the time because the rest of the time they don't, it's transparent to them because you've set up the environment in such a way that them just doing their job in the natural way that they do their job is the secure way, right? If they get hired and they get a YubiKey on first day, they're not going to ever know another world
Right.
of authenticating without a YubiKey.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, I'm gonna get on my high horse just for a little bit. One reason why I'm a real big fan of the idea, your ideas of secure by default is I see too many security teams, especially in the operations side, are utterly reactive. They're running to the ground. They're constantly fighting fires. And I think so much of that is just from the problem you're talking about is that you're not secure by default. There are too many things or too many problems. There's always something wrong. Like there's Cisco, your Cisco devices that are exposed to the internet. I mean, these days they should call this like a remote engineering feature, not an RCE. And so it's just those are I just the idea just boggles my mind that you would put in a management interface for a network device on the freaking internet. I mean, those are just I don't even know what to say. And I just think that by that secure by default could just reduce the workload because I feel for some of these teams I talk to. They are obviously just overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's funny when I report on a lot of cybersecurity news myself
Mhm.
via various channels, right? And so I get to read a lot of these breaches and a lot of these vuln reports and ODay drops, and there's basically two buckets of people that are digesting this content. There's people that are going to read these things and react and like, hey, this ODay just dropped. I use that package, I use that software.
Mhm.
Let's go patch it right now because I just read this ODay, and then without fail, every ODay I report on, within 6 weeks, there's a story that Up that O-Day that we just talked about. Oh yeah, part of a massive data breach campaign because someone weaponized it. It's on the internet, and so Confluence, for example, Confluence had an O-Day a few
Yeah.
weeks ago,
Or let's talk
right?
about Move It. I mean, I'm
Or
still
Move It,
getting letters
Move
about
It,
that. It's
right?
crazy.
Move It's going to be the largest data breach ever by the numbers, by the
Yeah.
way, right? And yeah, all of us that pay attention to cybersecurity saw these vulnerabilities drop immediately. You know, if we needed to, ran a bit of a fire drill to clean it all up, and that was it. We're like, okay, we're good. We feel good, right? And then, like I said, within a few weeks, like just this week, nation state targeting Confluence.
Yep.
You still go on Shodan. There's still hundreds of vulnerable Confluence boxes, internet exposed on Shodan. It's like, okay, the bucket of people that didn't react fast enough is now getting popped, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. If you're taking that secure by default, that risk isn't there because your Confluence isn't sitting on the bare ass on the internet. You know, your Cisco devices are not sitting on the internet. You know, those are, you know, and then you still patching them, but it's not a emergency fire drill because they're going to set your house on fire.
Yeah, I've worked in a number of places that actually have we called them internet hygiene teams. And that's what it was. It was like, hey, like, what do we have that's like out there? Is it supposed to be out there? Are the certificates up to date? We see that a lot. Is this domain registration going to lapse? You see that a lot, right? There's a lot of, just being on the internet. There's like cost of being on the internet because like you're going to get scanned, you're going to get, you're going to get the spray and pray attacks, and then you're going to get the targeted stuff.
I work with one team. They don't have any internet exposure at all. And the way they've architected the gap between what's on the internet versus where their assets are on the inside, I was like, wow. I mean, that took a lot of work, but boy, it pays off in spades.
I've seen some hedge funds that just have that one splash page with like their name on it. It doesn't say anything they do because they're not even a customer facing hedge fund. They're one of those funds that eats their own, and that's it. And literally nothing on the internet. Yeah, no, they've got the fiber direct.
Exactly.
They've drilled through the cement wall to make the fiber
connection as short as possible. Was like, what exposure? There isn't any. And I was like, what?
Yeah. So like, patch? No, we're not going to patch because that's no.
Exactly. So we're running up the time. Hey, so why don't you tell the audience about your newsletter? I really enjoy your newsletter, by the way. It's very informative.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's called Vulnerable You. You can also find me on Twitter, Matt J, MattJay. And that's where you can kind of find all my links to my newsletter. My niche it comes out every week. It's free. And the shtick that I do, it's like cybersecurity news. What do we stay on top of? My thoughts on a lot of it. But then also I write a blog post every week that usually has something to do with mental health in the field, personal growth in the field. It's got passion of mine. I've talked a lot about like mental health and working in cybersecurity. I think our industry is prone to either attracting people or creating people that might have some struggles with in those areas. And so and so that's my whole Vulnerable You. It's the whole play on words is like, hey, we're going to be a little bit more vulnerable about ourselves and our struggles, and rising tides raise all boats. Oh, thanks, Chris. I just saw the note come in. Cool. So appreciate you checking that out. I'm coming up on a year in on the newsletter, and I've started doing it on YouTube and podcast version of it as well for those of you who would rather not read an email, but for some reason look at my mug or hear my voice on your commute to work or something like that. So
hey, there we go. Hey, and I really appreciate it. So I want a quick plug for Cribble. So the Cribble community, it's almost 6,000 strong now. Cribble.io/community. Sign up, join our Slack channel. Always enjoy chatting. Myself, I'm frequently available on Twitter, as Matt knows. eBailey1367. Same name for the Blue Sky app as well. If you're looking at branching out. Also, just give the community a try. Also, we have Cribble sandboxes at sandbox.cribble.io, so you can get your hands on all of our products with guided walkthroughs. 15-minute commitment to know, can these products help you out? I think we've shown just a lot of capabilities, a lot of options, especially just make your lives a lot easier. So, Matt, I really appreciate being today on the show today. I hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll jump on your own sandbox. Hey, I don't mind saying it. My team, the reason Ed and I know each other, my team is a big fan of your product. So my day job, security data people love Cribble. So
hey, we appreciate it. Yeah, we always want to hear, what's the good, the bad. We want to hear how can we help you make your lives easier? Because at the end of the day, you want to get through this and go home. And and it is such a challenge. I mean, the industry is just, as you're mentioning, I mean, there's a fine line between causing mental health and just having mental health issues. And so it just, how do you got to protect your people? It's what
Yep.
what you just have to do.
Yep.
Hey,
Absolutely.
but thank you again. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon. For everyone, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and we'll have another show on Friday. Looking forward to it. Max Weber, noted detection and security engineer, is going to show us the cool things he's doing to drive better detection. So, looking forward to it. Take care.